All right, let's talk about stuff. You want it, I want it, we all want it. But the problem is there's just not enough to go around for everybody. So today we're going to do something a little crazy. We're going to try to tackle the entire field of economics in about 5 minutes. Let's do this. At its very core, economics boils down to one simple, kind of annoying problem: scarcity. I mean, think about it. Our wants? They're basically endless. But the things we need to actually satisfy those wants, the time, the money, the raw materials, they're definitely limited. And that tension, right there, is the whole reason economics is even a thing. Right? Like, why can't we all just have infinite pizza? If we could, economics would be totally pointless. We wouldn't have to make any tough choices about who gets the last slice because, well, there'd be no last slice. But reality check. We don't live in that world. So we're stuck having to figure out how to divide things up. Okay, so to put a name on it, this big problem is called scarcity. It's that fundamental mismatch between our unlimited wants and the world's limited resources. And because of scarcity, we have to make choices all the time, which leads us straight to the first major pillar of economics. So, because we have to choose, every single decision we make comes with a kind of hidden price tag, even when no money is involved. This brings us to one of the most important ideas you'll ever learn in economics. It's called opportunity cost, and it's actually pretty simple. The real cost of anything is the next best thing you gave up to get it. So yeah, the opportunity cost of you watching this right now might be watching some hilarious cat videos. I'm going to do my absolute best to make this a worthwhile trade-off for you. All right, so scarcity forces us to make choices, and every choice has an opportunity cost. Got it. But, we're not making these decisions all alone on a desert island. We're all interacting with each other, which brings us to the systems we've created to manage all this. And that interaction leads to a really powerful idea called comparative advantage. Here's the cool part. It explains why it's good for people to trade, even if one person is like a superhero who's better at everything. It's not about being the absolute best. It's about specializing in whatever you're most efficient at, what you give up the least to produce. So let's put these pieces together. You take the problem of scarcity. You add in our ability to trade with each other based on opportunity cost, and what do you get? Boom, you get a market, which is really just any place where buyers and sellers can get together and do their thing. So what makes a market tick? It's that classic dance of supply and demand. Demand is just how much people want something. Supply is how much of it is out there. And where those two forces meet, that's what sets the price. It's all driven by incentives. When prices go up, sellers get excited to sell. When prices go down, buyers are ready to pounce. Of course, imagine trying to trade, a goat for your Wi-Fi connection. It would be a total disaster. That's exactly why we invented money. It's not just paper or coins. It's this amazing tool that does a few really critical jobs, basically acting as the lubricant that keeps the whole engine of trade running smoothly. Okay, so we've got people and companies interacting in all these markets. But how do we zoom out and, take the temperature of the entire economy? We need a way to see the big picture. And that brings us to the big one, gross domestic product, or GDP. You've heard this term thrown around a lot. All it is the total value of all the finished goods and services a country produces in a year. This formula might look a little intimidating, but trust me, when you break it down, it's pretty straightforward. C is consumption. That's just you and me buying stuff. I is investment. That's businesses spending money on new factories and machines. G is government spending. And that last little bit, X minus M, is just our exports minus our imports. You add all that up, and you get a pretty decent snapshot of the economy's size and health. But here's the thing about GDP. It doesn't just go up in a nice, neat line. Economies move in cycles, kind of like a roller coaster. Things grow fast in a boom, then they hit a peak. Then they might shrink for a while in a recession until they bottom out in a trough. And then the whole ride starts all over again. So if economies naturally go through these wild ups and downs, are we just supposed to hang on and hope for the best? Well, not exactly. There are some really big players, namely governments and central banks, that are always trying to smooth out that ride using some very powerful tools. And they have two main toolkits. The first is monetary policy. This is run by a central bank, like the Federal Reserve in the US. They play with interest rates and the money supply to either cool down or heat up the economy. The second is fiscal policy. That's the government's job, using its power to tax and spend. This always brings up a great question. Why not just print a ton of money and solve everyone's problems? Well, think back to supply and demand. If you flood the system with more money, but the amount of actual stuff to buy stays the same, what do you think happens to prices? They shoot up, and that's called inflation. And in really extreme cases, you get what's called hyperinflation. Just look at this number. That was the annual inflation rate in Zimbabwe in November of 2008. It got so ridiculous, they were printing 100 times trillion-dollar bills that couldn't even buy a loaf of bread. That is the danger of getting monetary policy very, very wrong. Okay, let's zoom out one last time for the big finish. We have to remember that economies aren't just isolated bubbles. We're all trading with each other across the globe, and the whole system is run by humans, who, as it turns out, aren't exactly rational computers. Remember that comparative advantage idea? It works on a global scale too. If it costs Brazil less corn to make coffee than it costs Canada, it's a no-brainer. Brazil should focus on making coffee, Canada should focus on growing corn, and then they trade. It's a win-win. They both end up with more stuff than if they tried to do it all themselves. Now, about that human element. For a very long time, economic theories were built on this idea that we all make perfectly logical, rational choices. But then a whole new field called behavioral economics came along and basically said, have you actually met a human being? Because, spoiler alert, we're not. Our brains are full of these weird little biases that make us do irrational things with money. Losing 20 bucks hurts way more than finding 20 bucks feels good. We'd much rather have $5 right now than $50 a year from now. And we'll sit through a horrible movie just because we paid for it. These little mental quirks actually cause huge economic events, from stock market bubbles to personal debt. So when you strip everything else away, every single economic system on the planet, from pure capitalism to pure socialism and everything in between, is just a different way of trying to answer three very basic questions. What are we going to make? How are we going to make it? And who gets the stuff once we've made it? And here's the final takeaway. There is no single perfect answer. Every system involves trade-offs. The real question isn't about finding the perfect solution. It's about deciding which trade-offs we as a society are willing to live with. And that fundamentally is what economics is all about.